yourself and your company, if that's okay, please.
Yeah, I'm Richard Goodwin. I'm the Group Chief Executive of the JJ Group, and we are an apprenticeship and training company. We have a specialism around marketing, sales, events, and similar, as well as some other very specific sectors.
Lovely. Candice, would you mind just introducing yourself, please?
Yes. So Candice, recently, I'm not going to say unemployed, freelancer, all of the above. Yeah, working with or advocating for events apprenticeships for the events industry and supporting the Power Events through their schools engagement and ambassador program at the moment.
Okay. Sian, would you like to?
Sure. So I am Sian. I'm Director of People, Partnerships and Strategic Projects at Intel, one of the Beam member travel management companies. I'm also on the board of Beam as Governance Director.
I'm Carla Garman. I work at Abstract Events. I've previously been in hotels since I was 17. So don't actually know anything other than working in hotels and organising events. And I'm also on the Beam board in the training and development area. So hence the reason myself and Sian are on the call today. So let's get cracking, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I suppose from my point of view with apprenticeships, I'm a small agency. So it's quite scary to look out there and say, I'd like to take on an apprenticeship, but what's it going to cost me? And am I going to have to spend all my time looking after somebody for the foreseeable, well, for the next year or and on, and what that looks like, because it's quite daunting.
Okay, shall I take this, Candice?
Yeah,
so I think the first thing with an apprenticeship is an apprenticeship match is a training course that's really specific to a specific job role. So there are 800 odd different apprenticeships out there that all match a job role, whether that is event assistant, for example, or sales executive, or something more technical like AV coordinator, or whatever it might be. But the apprenticeships are built on a set of assumptions, and the first assumption is that they are typically between 12 months and a couple of years long, and it just depends on the particular apprenticeship and on the particular provider or college that you might choose to use, or university, if it's a university, that you might choose to use. And there is clearly, at least morally, even if it's not contractual, and a set of assumptions on which the apprenticeship is built. And the set of assumptions are essentially that the person, whether young or older, is employed by your company for the duration of that apprenticeship on payroll.
Okay.
And if you can get a really specialist provider that works a lot with events companies and can understand the ups and downs of the industry in terms of activity levels, that's great. But a lot of providers, like a local college, for example, is essentially designs the apprenticeship across the period of time. So 12 months, 18 months, whatever it might be. So a generalist provider may find it difficult to cope with peaks and troughs of workload where all of a sudden people aren't available or are so available that they can't actually apply what they've been learning. So I think there's two things there. First of all, it is a ethical commitment from you to keep that person employed. Clearly, they are a member of your staff. So if something goes wrong, or the company has financial issues, or the apprentice isn't getting on and doesn't get through probation, or whatever it might be, you're perfectly free to take what action you need to take. But in terms of all things being equal, you will employ that person for a period of time. And so, yes, you are taking on a commitment in the sense of at least a moral commitment, although contractually it's employee, so you treat them as such.
Okay.
There are some, what I wouldn't worry about is paying for the training, because if you're a small company, the government pays 95% of the training costs. And if you're a large company, there's a fund up there called the Apprenticeship Levy, which you have access to. Your HR people will know all about it. And it's money that's already been paid. There's nothing else you could do with it other than pay for apprenticeship. So it's just not an issue if you're in a large organisation.
If you're a small or a large, it's a win-win anyway.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So what you're looking at, an apprenticeship is a training course, essentially, and it can be used to bring people into the organisation, or it can be used to upskill people who are already in the organisation but haven't had formal training in the role they're in. Maybe they came through and they moved across the organisation from a customer service role to a sales role, or from a technical role to a managerial role, or whatever it might be. An apprenticeship is a mechanism to make sure that they really understand the new role, where they may not have that sort of line management background and experience. There are the financial benefits of the apprenticeship in terms of your original question, which was the commitment. If it's a relatively young person and they've been recruited into the role, then there is no employer's national insurance payments to be made on their salary for at least the first year.
Okay.
And that can be quite valuable depending on how much you pay, of course. And then there are other little grants and bonuses that may be available in particular circumstances as well. So the commitment is, if it's somebody you're recruiting, the commitment is really you deciding that you are willing to host somebody, I guess. Hopefully somebody forever, because the point about apprenticeship is to train your workforce. It's not a short-term thing where you put all the work in and then they fly off and go and work somewhere else in an ideal world. So the cost is your the commitment is your commitment to growing your next generation or growing your workforce's skills. It's not so much a direct financial commitment. In fact, it probably works out costing you slightly less in terms of pay and rations, as it were, than you would otherwise.
Okay, thank you. Sean, would you like to follow up on that with your guys at Intel? And we spoke briefly previously about you actually encouraging your teams who've been there a long time to do apprenticeships as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're part of the 5% Club, where as a business we commit to at least 5% of our entire workforce to be on apprenticeships and professional development courses. We actually set our own strategic objective to have that at 10% of our workforce across the business, which it sounds like a lot, but the reality 10% is 10%, whether you've got 3 people or 1,000 people. The metric is going to be the same. What you are committing to is that professional development. So one thing we do, which does help, is we tend not to use the word apprenticeship, which I know sounds counterproductive, but we use professional development as opposed to an apprenticeship course. Obviously, when we're filling in forms and signing people up, it's an apprenticeship. We can't get away from that. That's the government scheme. But internally, it's CPD. You're on a CPD course. You're not a 16-year-old. It doesn't matter if you're coming in or you're 40 doing it. We don't call you an apprentice because we find that turns people off, right? Yeah. That's what puts people off. So we phrase it as professional development. We offer out, currently we've got people from level 3 right up to level 6. We had a couple of level 7s as well in different areas. They are degree level apprenticeships. People are getting their degrees while they're studying. No student debt. That's very, very important. Having a child that's just gone to uni, I wish he'd done a degree level apprenticeship. It would have saved me a lot of money. But I think, and we have them across the board. We have them in our meetings and events team on the event side. We've also got finance, payroll, HR, sales. The point made there, we had someone move from our supplier partnership team into a on the road new business sales role. They're doing the new business level 4. It's a brilliant course to do. And the commitment to us, yes, we are we're a levy payer. And again, I wouldn't get too bogged down in levies, non-levies and things like that. You don't need to worry. If your wage bill is 3 million or under £3 million a year, you don't pay a levy. You pay 5% for your apprenticeships. That's the simplification of it, right? If you're over that, you're probably doing it already, in fairness, because you're paying it. So you'd be silly not to. There's no reason not to. And then we offer it out and people can choose to join. We do have entry levels come in on actual professional development contracts that we cover for the duration of what the apprenticeship course will be. But that's not all 16-year-olds. I've just had someone in my people team who has just completed her level 3 HR qualification, and she came and she's 2 years younger than me. We're not going to say how old that is, but I can tell you it's not 16. And she came in and just completed her level 3. She's having a year's break. She's going to go on to do level 5. That's how we see the apprenticeships develop and develop. The commitment from us is that 20% of her week is given to her apprenticeship. That's a learning day. She's not in the business. She goes off and does her learning, and people split that differently. Sometimes it's a whole day. I've got a couple of people that like to do a couple of hours a day to break it up, and I've got some people that do a half day for 2 days. And if you're really, really busy, especially in the events, and you're on site for like a week or 2 weeks, you can bank it and then catch up after. That's the beauty of it. As long as you're on track for the amount of hours that you need to be at certain milestones, you don't have to, it's not every single week. For some roles, that just doesn't work. Whereas some roles, it's fine. I think that's one of the worries people have. Oh my God, what do I do if they're not in the business for that day? Well, just change the day.
Okay.
It's really simple.
Okay.
Unless I've said anything wrong, and then Candice.
No, I'm probably going to jump in there with a question, if you mind, Carl. I suppose the question that's coming to my mind through this whole conversation and the conversations that we hear constantly from the industry is the understanding which you've kind of just highlighted from both Richard and Sian's point. But I suppose the kind of question is, how do we get the industry to how do we change the narrative around, obviously it's an apprenticeship, but how do we change that narrative around getting the industry behind the apprenticeships, and how does that need to happen? And I suppose it was the conversation we had yesterday, wasn't it, around that kind of creating that talent pipeline. We know as an industry there's lots of much older people that are going to retire, are going to move off, and there's going to be that gap, isn't there, between people that with all of that skills and experience who are going to leave. How do we fill that talent gap through that kind of workforce question? And it's almost, how do we what can we do as an industry to get other employers to kind of get to grips with it? Does that make sense, kind of in terms of where we're going with it? And I suppose that's a question for Sian, Carla, working in the industry, and I suppose Richard, around what can we do to kind of change that narrative to get people to look at it as career development, as professional development, kind of helping them really, because that's what I think young people and older people in the industry are looking at, is developing different skills. I don't know, it's just a question I was just thinking about as I was sitting here listening to you both.
I mean, Carla, what you've been umming and ahhing about going down the apprenticeship route. What are the main things that put you off, I guess, to answer that? Because you're very typical of the audience that we think aren't embracing apprenticeships.
Yeah, so I would say the time that it would take. We're only small, so like how much time would we need to invest in that person or persons across the duration of the apprenticeship? Or is it a case of, I don't know what it looks like, I suppose. This is where I'm stuck. What does it look like? Maybe Candice could help me with that. Like, and also what areas, like where are the gaps in the apprenticeship? What apprentices are out there that need these roles, and what sort of roles in this industry? Is it marketing? Is it events coordinator?
Yeah, no, it's a good question.
I mean, there's over 800 different apprenticeship courses, I think, in the UK at the moment, from, being an abattoir worker right through to, childcare and events and everything from A to Z and in between, I think. I work on a kind of 80-20 rule, I think, because Richard is right. There's the apprenticeships are based around set job criteria to support those. Does everyone fit 100% of what that person is going to do? No. We work on if it's going to support with 80% of their learning and development, then we see that as a win for us. So you'd have your job description or your job spec, and you match that to the apprenticeship. It's all online. Like, you don't need to go hunting for this stuff. It's the government website on apprenticeships are actually pretty good. So you can go, okay, this is the one that matches the most. This is going to get the skills. And it might not be the title of the job. So for instance, you might find some of the sales ones actually really good for your account management team, even though the kind of apprenticeship is focused on new business. The skills are actually what we call our account management team are doing. So you just look through, you can filter by industry, you can filter by area. We've got some of the marketing ones are actually really good on the event side, because that's the skill set that you learn and it's transferable. And your training provider will do a skill scan with that person at sign up to go, actually, this is what they know now, this is what they will learn, and they'll look at the job description and go, actually, yeah, there is enough in here to complete the apprenticeship, because the idea is you've got to put into practice what they learn. So if their job description is way off and they're never going to be able to do anything, then it's not the right course. But if you get a really decent training provider, and that's really key, the partnership there, they will support you through that and make recommendations and work through that side of it.
Okay, so my next question then, Candice, it would be, where do you start? So who do you go to first? Like, what route do you go down?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've had a few inquiries, or I get a few inquiries, just kind of people coming to me saying, we're looking at taking on apprentices. We've spoken to our HR team. They like the idea. Kind of what are the next steps for us? So normally what we do is obviously have a look at the website, look if there's anything particular on there from an apprenticeship point of view. And then I set up a call with the likes of Richard or a training provider that can then talk them through that process and kind of really probably delve a lot deeper than I can on a apprenticeships kind of process perspective. And then it's up to the training provider and that kind of employer to take that conversation away, look at how they want to develop that. But it's probably a question for you, Richard, because I know a few employers will look at, as you said, Sean, a job description and go, well, actually, none of the apprentices, the event apprenticeship doesn't really fit. Is there a way of kind of changing that up or adding different modules? And I think we did something similar with the security apprenticeship, where we added, or we kind of included some event related modules within that. So I don't know, Richard, if there's anything you kind of add to that, so that employers feel like when they're taking on an apprentice, it is going to reflect the actual skills and experience that they're looking for within that role.
Yeah, it's what people have said is right. It comes down to the match between the job description and the apprenticeship standard, which is what it's called, the apprenticeship course itself. And courses can be tweaked. So specialist providers for the event sector, for example, will clearly put some very specialist content in, even if the course is not specialist, like finance or HR or something. But just generally, it is you presumably know the role that you're interested in having an apprenticeship for, or you know the person who's already within the business and what they do. And it is a case of going to the Skills England website. And if you just Google Skills England apprenticeship standards, you'll get lists and you can filter them on by area and stuff like that. And working out the best match. And Sean's absolutely right. You need the closer the match, the better. There's no point teaching people stuff they don't need to know, and they can't apply it. And that's bad for everybody, because as an apprenticeship provider, we are a regulated industry. We are Ofsted inspected, just like the schools and the colleges. And therefore, you can't put people on the wrong course, because people withdraw because it's not relevant, and that hits your achievement rates, and then the regulators are on your back and all that kind of stuff. So it needs to be the right course for the right person in the right role. And the art of being a good provider is to be able to get that match and make sure that everything fits, whether that means tweaking the course slightly, or sometimes it means tweaking the job description slightly, because sometimes it may just be history that that the person's job is focused on X and not on Y. It may not be actually the optimal way forward. So it just depends, but it's that match that makes a great apprenticeship. And you're also absolutely right, Sean, in terms of the branding of apprenticeships. And we very much, because we do very niche apprenticeships, we very much call ourselves an apprenticeship provider, and people come to us for an apprenticeship. But there are lots and lots of very large providers who specialize, particularly around the management type apprenticeships, who absolutely do not lead on the fact it's an apprenticeship. They market it as a management development program. It happens to be funded through apprenticeship funding. And that's equally valid way of doing it. And it gets it much more uptake in large organizations and much more prestige, essentially. In some circles, the word apprenticeship is still associated with 16 to 18-year-olds leaving school and becoming a builder or a hairdresser or an engineer. And it's moved a long way from that. And although the prestige associated is catching up, and you can now get letters after your name if you complete your apprenticeship. So it's post-nominals, as they're called. Nevertheless, it still doesn't inherently, in most people's minds yet, carry the cachet of a degree or a master's degree, albeit sometimes a degree may be included and you get your letters and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to that whole, I don't know if somebody saw the post on LinkedIn, there was an episode on Slow Horses and they were talking about an events person, just somebody who does it as a part-time job or something that they do for fun. And I commented on it, and I think it comes back to that whole career pathway. At the moment, the events industry doesn't have a clear career pathway. So it's not seen as a professional industry. And I think that comes back to what you've just said, Richard, and what you've said, Sean, is the whole point of apprenticeships is to kind of professionalize the people that are coming into industry, so that they're working towards clear standards that are, are graded, are marked, that they are qualified to do. And I think that's the point, isn't it? They get a qualification at the end of that apprenticeship. It's not something that they do, they tick a couple of boxes, they get a certificate and off they go. Actually, it creates clear professional people coming to the industry, which is what the industry needs. And I think that also comes back to looking at, people from underrepresented groups or from disadvantaged backgrounds. Most of them are really passionate, creative, skilled individuals who want to come into the industry but don't see what that looks like. And again, it's an industry, as we need to show it, is that it is a professional industry. We do lots of different things within the roles that we work on, whether that's project management, whether that's finance, whether that's sustainability, and all of that is built in within those different apprenticeships. And I think that's the other thing that we need to start talking about a lot more, is actually it's a professional qualification that you could do to become a professional individual within your field. I don't know if anybody else has got kind of any comments around that.
Sean mentioned her colleague who's doing the HR assistant apprenticeship, for example, and that was level 3. And level 3 is, broadly speaking, A levels level, a couple of A levels equivalent. And then level 4, which people also talk about, is essentially the first year at university. If you were having an academic equivalent, that's what it would represent. Level 5 is a second year university or foundation degree equivalent. Level 6 is a first degree, with an honours degree equivalent. And level 7 is a master's degree equivalent. And if you've done these apprenticeships, let's say you then wanted to go on to university, actually they would count for your UCAS points for that, in that kind of context. I'm not suggesting that's what most people want to do, but I'm just trying to give it some element of tangible reality as a qualification to extend it. But I think there's two ways to look at it. There is helping people to move up the educational ladder through apprenticeships, but there's also the fact that a lot of people go to university these days, and if you graduate in philosophy, for example, there aren't many jobs as philosophers. So an apprenticeship is a really good vehicle for bringing the skills you've learned as part of your degree or your master's degree or your A levels, whatever they might be, into the workplace. And people shouldn't get too hung up on the level of the apprenticeship. The apprenticeship level reflects the job level, essentially. And so it's not the qualification itself where the level is important in that instance. It's what the job is and whether that suits you as a role. I'm pleased you mentioned Slow Horses as well, because we actually train people for the post-production company or production company that makes Slow Horses. So it's a small world. And I hate to confess, I've never actually seen it because I don't have Apple TV. I won't tell them that. Hopefully they won't listen to the podcast.
It's good. I think, Candice, you raised a really good point. Like, what do we need to do as an industry? And I think it kind of ties back to what Carla said. We talk a lot about the benefits of apprenticeships, but if someone is sitting there going, well, I'd like to do it, but I'm not sure, I think what we as an industry could possibly do is show them how easy it is to sign up, because I still think, like, I can sit here and say, yeah, we do this and we do this, and people think, oh, well, you're a large organisation, of course you've got a big people team. We didn't when we started what I call our proper professional development programme. We've always had apprenticeships at Intel for the last God knows how many years, but 1 or 2. It was post-COVID that we decided to really turn it into a structured programme. We were not a levy payer back then. Our wage bill was much lower thanks to COVID. So we did start from scratch. And yes, okay, we weren't 2 or 3 people. We still, were medium sized, but there was 2 of us in the people team at that point who managed and set it up and ran it and made it work. And it was just, a lot of Googling, a lot of talking to people who'd already done it, a lot of finding, using the network and going, well, how do I set up a digital HMRC apprenticeship account? Because I didn't know how to do that when I started, but I do now, and I'm happy to share that knowledge. But I think that's the bit, it's breaking down the myths of, okay, where do I go to start? And we started exactly like that, and now we're into it's a fully structured program that is, it goes through the blood of the business effectively. But it didn't start that way. It doesn't. Nothing starts like that. We found some very good training providers. We also found some that weren't the ones that would fit for us as well. You go through the ups and downs with those. We have different training providers for different specialities within the business. We don't have the same people providing our training for our IT and our software developers as we do our HR, because it doesn't work. Rich is absolutely right, specialisms, and we've got multiple training providers, and that works as well. So you scale it as you need to, or you keep to one or two. It doesn't matter how many you have, but it's dead easy to set it up. But I think it's scary because it's HMRC and it's a digital account, and you have to put details into a website, and you have to find people. And we use things with those are really good. It's a TripAdvisor style for people that rate training providers, and that can be the apprentice, the learners, or the employers. We use all of that data, and I think that's what we need to get across. It's where to find that stuff, how to where do you even go to start? I think that would be easier, because I think that's the scary bit.
Yeah,
and it's a bit of work to start, but it's not loads.
Yeah, but I think that comes back to what Events Apprenticeship has been trying to do since I think the end of 2022-23, is create that kind of that bridge between actually you've got a place to go to find the initial information. Kind of we've developed the good practice employer guide, which we worked with Richard and some other training providers on what that process looks like, what that training provider process looks like. We've got a page on all the different types of apprenticeships, what the different levels mean. So it's almost kind of that is what we want people to use as that starting point. And then we kind of bridge that gap to say, right, okay, if you've actually really thought about it, great, we can put you in contact with the training provider who's already doing it to have that conversation. Or if you're still thinking about it, let's have a chat. What are your kind of barriers? What are the things you're looking for? And I think to your point, Carla, when you said you don't know what it looks like, I was being interviewed a couple of weeks ago for an article, and somebody said to me, it's like, what is important about apprenticeships or taking somebody on an apprenticeship? And I think it's that mentorship. I don't think it's where you don't have to sit with that apprentice every day, holding their hand, talking them through different processes, because obviously, quote me if I'm wrong, Richard, a lot of that is kind of assessed before the apprentice actually comes on board with the employer around what skills fit, what skills do they need, what soft skills do they need to be able to get this. All of that is done initially anyway, I think. Prove me if I'm wrong. So once that apprentice actually mentioned earlier. Yes, I think once that apprentice actually comes into the organisation, they already know the direction they want to take with their career. They already know what skills they want to gain. So all from like how I see it from an employer perspective, you just need to mentor them through that process. You need to have your whole team on board to kind of mentor them through that process. The training provider will do all of the kind of theory, teaching, learning piece. You just need to show them how to do the job. And that's exactly the same as if you employ somebody as an events executive or events coordinator or whatever, you still have to go through that exact same process. You still have to onboard them, teach them, show them all the different things that they need to do. So in my mind, it's no different. It's just you're giving somebody an opportunity to develop in a professional way, and you're just mentoring them through that process. That's kind of how I see it. So whether you're a small organisation or a big organisation, I think if you've got that ethos where you want to help people develop, you've got those, you've got good leaders that work within your organisation, you're already halfway there. I mean, that's kind of how I see it. But Richard, quote me if there's anything wrong in that statement, or Sean.
No, I think you're right. Going right back to the first question where Carla asked about the requirements, or I don't know, the burden is not quite the right stroke, but the commitments of an apprenticeship. And certainly, if you're using it to bring somebody into the organisation, which, like I say, only about half apprenticeships are used for that. The other half, like Sean says, it's training for people who are already within the organisation. But there is definitely a requirement to mentor that person. They are learning training. There are knowledge, there are skills, and there are behaviours they're learning. And a lot of that you can learn from a trainer, but some of that you learn because it's very specific to your company culture. How does Carla operate in the office, and therefore how does she want the person who works with her to operate in the office? And therefore there is definitely an element of mentoring and passing on your knowledge to, I can say, the next generation, but have to be younger, but to the person coming in. But to some degree, that burden is shared with the training provider, because they have people who do this for a living, essentially, but they're not sitting next to the apprentice 24/7 or 8 hours a day, whatever it might be, 5 days a week. That's you. So there absolutely is a commitment or to essentially provide some mentoring, but it's in your own interest, because you want the person to be in the company of the culture of your team or your organization, and nobody else has that culture. That is yours and yours alone. I mean, some of the basics, like if it's somebody who's really young and inexperienced, it's, when can you interrupt a meeting, or when can you how do you answer the phone, or when do you call people back as opposed to take a message or interrupt, that kind of really basic stuff at the lower end. But then right at the master's degree level end, so the level 6 level 7 apprenticeships, it's really complex stuff. And I mean, we have apprentices who can point to what they learned on their apprenticeship and say, we saved our employer hundreds of thousands of pounds because of something directly we did as a result of our apprenticeship. So it really can make a difference, and it changes lives of the individual, sometimes outside work as well as inside work. It's a whole new sense of achievement, of moving forwards, and sometimes a new way of thinking in some cases.
We see that a lot. I mean, most apprenticeship courses have what they call a project at the end of it, where it's demonstrating the skills, and that project is based on something within our business, change, proposal, a new process, and I don't think there's been any that haven't benefited us as a business coming in. Now, that might not be changing it to the tune of £1 million, but those small tweaks and that kind of nudge change where they bring their projects back in for the benefit, we've seen huge goals, and the sense of achievement that they get is phenomenal when we celebrate it within the business as well. Like, it gets attributed to them. And I think for the mentors as well, the line managers that look after those apprentices, is pretty cool as well. So I've been for a couple of, directly. That's very cool when you can see how they've grown through the courses. And yes, some of the courses are 18 months, but some of them are 36 months that you're committing to, as you go through the higher levels and things like that. But the benefit to the business is fundamental, not just in the cost saving of the training, but what they bring back in, and their kind of the feeling that they're being invested in, because it is an investment for us as a business. We're investing in that person, whether they've been there 5 minutes or 15 years, we still want to invest in them. So I think that's really important.
And I guess another way, picking that up, of looking at this is, one aspect of the apprenticeship is it is forcing is too strong, but it is putting in a process of regular continuous improvement, things that no one ever quite gets around to, because the apprentice has a project they need to do, and therefore they will be looking at things and trying to find ways to do it better, more effectively, for less money, whatever it might be, more productive. And therefore, your processes and your markets are being looked at on a regular basis for improvement. Of course, it's not done in isolation. It's not the apprentice goes off and does it. This is as part of the team and with the boss's input. And the line manager is really important. And if the line manager is not seeing benefit, then the apprenticeship programs like Sean's don't work. And clearly they do see benefit in that case.
Yeah. Definitely. And one of the other things we do, and this might be contentious for some, we don't pay the apprenticeship rate to any of our apprentices, even the 16 or 17-year-olds when they start. We pay above that. I think it's £7.55 or something like that. And our theory in terms of our development for our apprentices, or our recruitment tool for our apprentices, was that they should be paid more an hour than it costs to buy a Big Mac meal, right? Because we don't think that that's very fair. So we pay, our starting rate for apprentices start at £18,000, which again, it's not quite on the normal minimum wage or living wage, but it is a development rate for anyone entry level coming in for the level 2s and 3s. Goes up from that if they come in at a level 4. If they come in level 5 or level 6, it goes up accordingly to the job role that they would be in. And obviously, if you're doing existing staff, their rate doesn't change. That's what they're on, whatever they're on. We don't knock them down just because they're doing an apprenticeship, because that would be given on one hand and taken away. So have a look. One of the things I would say as an employer, have a look at what other employers in your area are paying for apprenticeships. It will be location specific. We benchmark ours against our local council because they have a huge apprenticeship program, and we found that we were competing, especially in things like business administration, finance, and those areas. So we were like, okay, well, we need to match that, because we're going to lose these people to them. It's not, you don't always lose within industry these days for those kind of other roles. So really look at what people are paying for apprenticeships in your local area, and don't pay the minimum just because you can. I don't think it's very fair.
I would absolutely agree with that. And I think you have to remember that we are in a labour market, and you're sending out messages if you pay the minimum. One message is, we're not going to pay you very much. And then, frankly, culturally and in other ways, you've got to be giving them a lot of stuff to persuade people not to leave, because they'll find somebody else who'll pay a bit more down the road. And your provider won't like that either, because, like I say, we're regulated. People watch our achievement rates, and if people are leaving the jobs and not taking the apprenticeship with them, as often happens, because they're disillusioned because they felt they were undervalued at the last place, then it's not good for the employer, it's not good for the provider, and it's not good for the apprentice. I'd also encourage, it also sends the wrong message about whether the employer values the apprenticeship, because you're trying to do is train somebody up for the future. And if you say, well, they're only worth minimum wage, maybe it's different if it's, let's say, an electrician, and when you finish, you get certificates and suddenly be earning 80 grand a year or whatever it might be. But in most roles, they don't have that big formal step at the end. It's an incremental process. So the other thing I would also suggest, always, and when we've had apprentices, we've always done this, is just have them as a member of staff on your payroll on a permanent contract.
Yes.
If somebody's not working out, then you have all the get outs you'd have anyway. But if you are building in, let's say, an 18-month contract, what you're saying is essentially when they get 2/3 through their course, or through after their first year, they will start looking around, because they know they might be unemployed in 6 months' time. So don't be surprised if you put all the effort into mentoring them through for 18 months, and then they say, well, thanks very much, and go off somewhere else, because you have put in that point there where you're forcing people to make a decision and look at other options. So I would always recommend a permanent contract. And like I say, there are other things you can do if it's not working out.
Yeah, apart from the training, they are exactly the same as any other employee. Same rights, same rules, same governance, same everything else. You can do permanent contracts. We do for some roles. The other ones where we may put a clause in that it's subject to completion of the apprenticeship, that then they're guaranteed a permanent role after, and all of those. You've got loads of levers you can pull, but the idea is you don't want them to leave. You want them to kind of stay and grow, and maybe that's the only course they ever do. Absolutely. But you might want to do a different one. And we've got a couple of the guys that their contracts are back to back, so it was when they started, they knew immediately they were doing level 4, but they were also then going to do level 6. That was the whole contract was based on them doing the 2 straight after each other. Or we did allow them a little break to have a holiday, obviously. But we do, you can do all of those back to back, and then as soon as we can reserve the funding ready for the next course, we will. And that really works, because then they know. We've had some of the guys go through, like you say, for the equivalent of A levels, but we know they're here to finish their degrees and stay on after that as well. They're permanent contracts, so that really helps. And I even paying the 5%, I know when we very, very first looked at it coming out of COVID, you're like, okay, well, any money is a lot of money at that point, right? When you're balancing the books and things like that. And even paying 5% on an apprenticeship, I don't know, that's 15 grand, for instance, 750 quid might be out of reach for some people. So what we did, we looked through our supply chain and we looked through all of our partnerships, and we got some of our 5% contribution paid by levy payers, and we do this as well. If we haven't used, it's very unlike us not to use our levy, but if we have got a bit left, then we can transfer to smaller companies that you don't have to even really be working with them. But our training providers are really, really helpful. Well, have a look. We can have a chat, Carla. It's all good. But our training providers were really, really helpful with that. They facilitated that. I didn't know about that until they told us, and we're like, right, we've got a connection. These guys haven't used their levy. We got some of ours funded by Microsoft, Accenture, some of the other really big PLCs, and we don't play in that pond at all. So that was really good. So we didn't even pay the 5% for quite a few of our apprentices back in the early days. that's definitely still worth looking into.
Okay. Well, it's been super insightful for me today.
You're going to do it, Carla?
Have you changed your mind, Carla?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got plenty of takeaways from today. Put it that way. Has anyone else got any other questions or anything to input?
Just like the conversations we've had today is just reiterating that point, how important it is for our industry to kind of really get behind it, to create those opportunities, because there's lots of apprentices who want to join. It's just we need to be able to create those opportunities. And I think just by the conversations we've had today, it's almost a no-brainer. Like, why wouldn't you? I think that would be the biggest question to industry is, why wouldn't you? What is the thing that is stopping you based on everything we've spoken about today? Because I think there's lots of positives, and I agree. I think maybe for small, medium, smaller companies, maybe there's a bit more of a conversation that needs to be had around how we can kind of help smaller organizations through that process, so that it doesn't seem like it's onerous and it doesn't seem like it's too difficult, but actually it will help your organization in the long term, because you've got somebody who can then progress, help you. They can then mentor the next apprentice that comes on board. So you've already created a pipeline of other people who are coming in to be able to, you've already got a ready-made mentor within your organization who's gone through it, who can help. So yeah, I think that would be me. A big thing is industry needs to get behind it. It needs to create that talent pipeline, and it can do that in, you know, like a multitude of ways. And just another point to make is, I don't know if anybody saw on LinkedIn that the government minister Stephanie Peacock had a conversation with UK Events this week, and one of the priorities that they were talking about was that continued growth, events, education and skills development through apprenticeships and postgraduate. So it's already on the agenda. So for me, it's, you know, if you're not doing it, you're going to be left behind with all of those other organisations that are doing it. So that would be my takeaway.
Okay.
I think so. The one thing that always sticks in my mind, and if you're in the same age range as me, you'll remember the government advert for personal tax where they had all the banknotes. They were like, it's money with your name on it, right? That's how I think of our apprenticeship programme, because we are paying as a levy payer. That's money with our name on it. We're silly if we don't use it. And when we're a non-levy payer, why the hell wouldn't I pay 750 quid for someone to have £15,000 worth of training? Like,
exactly.
That's my takeaway, right? With my, you know, director, business owner head on, you're silly if you don't do it.
Yeah.
And from a provider point of view, we want to work with people who want to have a view that their business wants to be much bigger or move forward over the next few years. Because, you know, in an ideal world, if someone's on an apprenticeship, whether they're existing staff or a new recruit, and that makes your business better. And then you say, oh, okay, we'll put other people on an apprenticeship. And then we have an ongoing relation that may last for many years, rather than something that we're not trying to flog you a one-off course, and then it all falls to pieces. Everyone says, oh, well, that's a shame. And all providers are incentivized like that because, like I say, government keeps an eye on what we're doing. So everybody is pulling together to try and move things in the right direction in terms of developing long-term relationships and making sure that apprenticeships really fit your company or really fit your industry sector. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
We're done, boss.
Thanks. So that was a really good discussion.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks, guys.